I want to talk about designing iOS apps, and for that to happen, we need to establish a few things. First of all, we need to discuss material design. Again, this is a design system created by Google. Google is intrinsically tied to Android. We don't want Android, we want iOS. Well, let me tell you why that logic is flawed. It's like not listening to Gordon Ramsay's cooking advice because you're not British and he is. Otherwise put, Google's material design system is universal. It's not meant just for Android. In simple terms, it's a set of rules that provides clarity, ease of use, and reduces development time. This does not mean you're supposed to follow a mold and subsequently create iOS apps that look like Android ones. I'm not saying you should copy-paste Android action bars and slap them on iOS projects, far from it. Having said that, most design principles and techniques that are covered in this course apply to iOS apps with only a few tweaks and exceptions. Thus, it's essential you understand that the material design guidelines apply to iOS apps. Regarding the differences and exceptions, we'll cover those in dedicated lectures. Going deeper, you should know most designers tend to use components and behaviors that are specific to each platform. For Android, the perfect example is the left menu. For iOS, we have the bottom bar, and you'll rarely, if ever, find a left menu. But the way we design them is similar. That's the essential point. We're talking about contrast, clarity, legibility, consistency, hierarchy, context, appropriate sizing, and so on. The principles stay the same. If you master them, you'll be golden. Okay, we've established that material design helps us design iOS apps. Should you try to design both? No, not really, and I have multiple points on it. From the perspective of a beginner who wants to learn something, it's best you pick a lane and stay with it. You don't start learning 3 different languages at the same time, right? Even though they're related and they sound somewhat the same, you take them one at a time. After you've reached a certain level of proficiency, you move on to the next one. If you ever try to learn them at the same time, not only do you spread out your time, you can also get confused by various subtle differences. Once you start mixing them up, you realize you've gone at it the wrong way. So that's one reason why you shouldn't attack both iOS and Android apps at the same time. The next reason is more pragmatic. In most situations, in most companies, things are compartmentalized. There's rarely a developer that handles both iOS and Android projects. You're either with Xcode or with Android Studio. I've seen more eclipses than skilled developers who chose to do both. On the design side, while things aren't as clear-cut, you'll still be attached to a team, be it Android or iOS. This means you'll cater to a certain group of people that have particular requirements. You won't go back and forth between platforms because it doesn't make sense productivity-wise. Any experienced project manager knows this. Even if you're the only designer on staff, in most cases, the company is going to create an app for each platform one at a time, not simultaneously. And in the very unlikely event that the company has the pockets and the ambition to launch both platforms at the same time, you can be confident they'll have 2 designers on staff. In reality, you'll see things are a mess. I'd like to be able to tell you that there's a system or a best practice guide that you can follow to create multi-platform apps, but that's not the case. I'd like to tell you that it's easy to switch between Android and iOS, but I'd be lying. As you'll see in another lecture, even some of the biggest companies on the planet mess up. Different looks, different functionality, and all sorts of things that don't make sense. We'll take them one at a time, but the second point you have to understand is that you won't be able to toggle between iOS and Android seamlessly. You shouldn't expect to be able to design for both platforms just like that. It's not realistic because each side requires specialization and experience. Through time, practice, and a lot of hard work, you'll get there. I'll be here for you to review your designs and steer you in the right direction, but you have to be patient and stay with it, even when things don't go your way. With that in mind, let's start our journey into the iOS realm.